You won't miss anything. So welcome everyone. This is Dr. Alana, and today is the 6th in a session of 10 for the docs or research master's students who are designing their research, beginning to build a proposal, beginning to put it together. So this is the first stage. This is the pre-data stage. And we've spent the last 5 weeks developing good habits and then looking with serious intent at the background, the lit, the methodology sections. So now we're going to put it together and have some conversation about writing. Okay, so what are our goals for today? We're going to start this conversation with, I'm going to ask all of the people in the room for some feedback about how it's going, what they're finding difficult. We can get a few hints out of that, and it's helpful for me to figure out how to steer the ship forward after this. Then I'm going to review the important parts of the last 5 sessions, trying to put them then into a more concise package from which we can discuss the writing of this. And I'm going to start that off with a discussion of bibliographic software, how to use it, some of the tools, some of its secrets, because we have a lot of stuff, don't we? When we put this together, we have a lot of lit and a lot of PDFs. And so how do we organize all that? Bibliographic software is part of that puzzle. And then I'm going to move a little bit into the writing conversation by talking about headings, points, and paragraphs, which will help you begin this process. Show you some resources, give some homework, remind you that if you have questions after this or about anything in this process, you can go to www.wooclap.com/summerqs. And in the office hours on Thursdays, I will answer those questions. And then even if you can't watch by recording, you'll have your answers. Now, there is also office hours right after this session. And some of you can jump right in there and get your question asked and answered live. Sounds like we have some sirens in the background. That's unusual where I live. Okay, so I want to restart this by reminding you that this is part of an overall strategy that this course has been built upon. So for anybody coming later, the things I want you to absolutely know are that your committee, chair, supervisor, everybody that supports you at the university, every reviewer you have on your document is looking for one thing. They're looking for inconsistency. Their job is to find the things that are not up to a high standard in your work. They do that, and they're paid for doing that by the university to make sure the university isn't publishing stuff they would be embarrassed by. So a good thing for you to remember right away is when anybody looks at your stuff, it's peer review. It's the way we're trained to start pointing out issues. The best thing you can do is to know that's what's going to happen and to go in and say thank you, because anything they point out now you can work with, and that saves you stuff at the end. It's hard until you get used to it. It's really hard to take this stuff in and go, oh, thanks for that. I thought I was doing much better than that. But in fact, that's the best headspace for you to have. Now, I had you find 5 critical analysis models. Those are going to show up again today as we talk about how to put these things together. I've talked a lot about arguments. That's going to show up again today as you begin to see how they go through your chapters. And your models are going to help you put all those things in place. Okay, so that's our strategy. Let's talk first, though. Please, if you're in the room, give me some feedback. Tell me what's been hard. What what if you're looking forward and you're might be a little concerned about a next step, let me know. If you ran into a wall, let me know. If you have doubts in your head, write them down. They won't, trust me, everybody here is in a very similar place, much more similar than different. In the hundreds and hundreds of people I've helped with this process, much more similar than different. So please start typing. Let us see how it's going and let me have some things to respond to. So let's see what you've said so far. Defining the problem statement is still challenging you. Okay, so Penelope, I'm going to say it's challenging for everybody. It's not an easy one. So work on it until you're pretty okay, and then put it away and do other things. And then feel free to send it on for an office hour. Feel free to come to an office hour and put it up, and I'll look at it. But after you've had a bit of relaxation away from it, because that's one that can tie you up in a knot, and we want to keep things moving rather than staying there. But just know that everybody, you might rewrite your problem statement until the very end of your document. It wouldn't be unusual. Settling on a framework that best analyzes the topic of teacher mentorship in a case study. Settling on a framework. So, Pat, you may have data, and the data may drive that framework. If you don't have data, and then I'm sure you have lit that talks about teacher mentorship models. So feel free to come to an open office hour and talk about that one a bit more. It's got some specifics in it or you may just be in a place where you're reading and thinking, and then that's just a place you are. But I will tell everybody, don't stay in any one place too long. If it feels like, oh, this again, make a decision and move on. You can always review it later. Theoretical framework is confusing and challenging. Theoretical framework is confusing and challenging, Myra. I agree. And I would say a couple of things. Look at what other people are claiming as their theoretical frame in your area, people you like. Look at their theory and see what it does, and then ask yourself, why is that a good platform to stand on? What strength does their work have that I like their work? What strength does their work have that I might take from this theoretical frame? And make it simple. At first, you don't need big. This is theoretical frames in your final work at this stage are a box to check. Most of us become wedded and really learn how to use it after we get our degrees. So for now, a good way into that is to look at what other people have stood on and then to just question yourself about it. Obviously, if you really like data and analysis, then you tend to be empirical. And if you really like to get things done, you tend to be pragmatic. Those are some basics. Okay. Overall research design, over and over and over, Jennifer. It changes as it goes. Were you around for that the circle? If not, it's a background. I know what you want the end to look like. So working backwards to dissect it is the challenging and fun part. Well, as long as you don't know what you want your results to be, as long as you know what the whole thing should look like, then good. And when you're drawing out, when you do research design stuff, it's useful to draw out the parts. That might help. Okay, turning my concept paper into my proposal is hard. because you have all these extra things you have to do and you have to know where to put them in what place. I'm making sure I'm using the best framework and methodology. You know, Asia, they're best. We get really close and then we ask other people and we settle on something. Until we do research a lot, we can't really claim best because it takes experience to know. No matter what you've chosen this time, by the end, you're going to wonder if you should have done something else differently, because it's the process that gets us through. It's the analysis of it that teaches us the most. So going into a big challenge, you can't know what it's going to be like on the other side of that challenge, but you can hopefully have good help from your university. I think getting the framework right has been the hardest so far. Now that I have a better roadmap, your work is starting to flow. Good for you, Erica. Lit review. Lit review, on and on and on. We've got some hints that might help. It's the organization. Once you get the organization down and you follow some things I'm going to say today about the writing, Jennifer, so listen real carefully when I get to the part about funneling, because that might be useful. Theoretical framework, the book you recommended was very worthwhile read. It is a very worthwhile. She is talking about this book. If you're new, it's called Reason and Rigor. It's by Ravitch and Riggin, and they talk about theoretical and conceptual frameworks in a way that I found more helpful than anything else I've ever seen. Good. I'm glad they're helpful. Good. Gotcha. And we've got some thank yous. So those were probably useful. Dwayne, I'm beginning to think that I may want to slightly alter research topic. Oh, yeah. In order to get at the questions I'm most interested in. Yes, I want to create a space for this, knowing it will mean rethinking methodology and data collection. So everything has to be, it's an iterative circle, and every time we iterate into a new thing, we have to rethink all the rest. But so think of yourself as spiraling into your final. And the logic of design tool, Dane, is meant to help you rethink those things. So it's useful. All right. Thank you very much for that conversation, everybody in the room. It helps me settle into what's going on in your world, and then it's helpful, guides into the next conversation. So I really appreciate it. All right, so now our task is to pull the last 3 weeks together. Background lit methodology. A little bit about good habits. So the first good habit, be aware that every section you write, for everything you ever write, ever, can be mapped out as a funnel, because that's what your reader needs. Your reader needs you to establish the big overarching contextual ideas, to get them started, to bring them in, and then they need you to kind of bring those in and then get to where is the significant part of that big idea. And that funnel we do naturally. When we're on a roll and we know what we're talking about, we do that naturally. But when we're stuck in research land, and this is the first time you've ever done it, that may be a lot harder. So when you find yourself stuck in your writing, it is really useful to come back to this funnel and draw out so it should be heading. So every heading funnels down to the final point that is the transition to the next heading, which funnels down every heading. The whole chapter funnels as well. Problem statement funnels to problem, funnels to significance, everything. That's how much I use it. And when I write and my ideas are like faster than my head is, and it's just not flowing together very well, then I back out I literally use this picture. I put it on my Word document and I figure out what I would count on for each of those pieces, and boom, it pops up. That's the problem I'm having. I need to rearrange some stuff so it funnels better, or I need to reconsider this chapter organization, or some of these things shouldn't even belong in this funnel. They need to go somewhere else. And then it's rearranging. A lot of your revision is going to be rearranging as much as it's going to be wordsmithing. So funnel. Point number one, funnel. Point number two, the purpose of what you are doing is halfway in between the problem statement and the significance. So your purpose is to work on the problem, to work at solving the problem, because some people at some level of the significance, whether it's in the field or the local context or your own, some level of significance, and you can have multiple levels of significance. You want to solve that because it's significant, and then you want to use a particular methodology that will deliver the answers to the questions you ask. So your purpose is somewhere between your problem statement and your significance. And you probably can talk about your purpose pretty well, because you have some reason, some drive inside that this topic is getting to you. Like Dane said, getting to the questions he's most interested in. So think about the connection, and that's the beginning of what you do in your background. Then there's a relationship between significance and the size you need to shoot for in your methodology. So I'll go back. If my significance is to the field as a whole, then I need to think about that, because if I'm studying my neighborhood and the 5 people that live closest to me, how is that answer going to be significant to my field as a whole? See what I'm saying? So you're claiming in your argument, you're claiming a significance. Well, then your methodology needs to back that up. So you might be significant to the local context, significant to the benefit of a system to others, and through that to the field as a whole. So how does that? So all those that are affected in the field is larger than those that are affected in your state, is larger than affected in those in your area. If you're, and most of you will be doing convenience samples, are affected. So you're studying those that you can get your hands on. And then how does that tie into the bigger dreams that you have? This is something that you need to consider. And you might do it, as I suggest here, you might do it because it's purposeful. So it might be that people in the larger field that you can bring in race and ethnicity, cultural issues. You could bring in some kind of, you could look at how your issue affects a wide thing. And then you can make sure that your sample has little bits of that, enough of that to be significant. It takes fewer to be significant in a qualitative sense than it does to be in a quantitative sense. But you have to think about that when you're thinking about your population and sample size. I also discussed that there's this thing about argument that has to run through everything else. So in the argument, you're saying that your work is significant in a particular way. Then that transfers over to your lit, which is organized in a way. Now, one organizational pattern, it could be organized according to the significance levels. So it could be organized, all the ideas that are important to the field, all the ideas that are important locally or nationally, that could be an organizational pattern for your lit. any organizational pattern will work, but it has to somehow relate to the significance. So in the one I drew out, I took Reason and Rigor's idea that you could organize your lit as a conceptual design, the whole chapter. And you would have topical research, you'd have personal interests, and you'd have gaps in the lit, and you'd have your theoretical. You'd probably start with your theoretical, you'd probably tip it on its end. And but you'd work through those topic areas and the lit around it, which then leads to the methodology. The gaps in the lit specifically lead to the way you set up your population. The topical research specifically leads to who is the population and how you're getting to them in the sample. And of course, theory needs to relate across. So there's relationships here. Now, if we're talking about the three main ideas, it doesn't have to be chapters. You could be writing smaller pieces. Your background is where you set up your argument. Your lit is the evidence that backs up the argument, and your methodology convinces people that you can make that significant an impact by doing that research. So be aware of what part of the argument is going into which place, and that when you're writing lit, you're writing evidence for your argument. People tend to write lit like, oh, I have to tell everything I know about this topic. Not the purpose. The purpose of lit is to be the evidence in the argument that your work is significant in those ways. So again, you're funneling. And then coherence. As I said, the people who are looking at your work are looking mostly, the first thing they look for is when this over here doesn't go with this over here. And so coherence between the problem statement, the significance level to the topical lit, and the gaps that there will be gaps. If there are big gaps in the lit, then you can make a case for significance to the field. If it's just that they haven't studied it in a localized context like yours, it's a regional significance. And then the literature itself, and then those things play off of what methods you use. And I recommend it all the way through, and these slides are in the handouts. And I recommend that you make your own, and that you work through your ideas visually, because that will help you write them. Okay, so that put 3 hours of stuff into a very short time, but as an overview. So now let's talk about how you get it done. And I want to just show you 3 things. This is Zotero. This is SSP Bib. See how similar they are? And this is EndNote on the web. So, and this is EndNote. So tell me, what bibliographic software are you all using? I'll wait for some answers to come in as I switch to screen capture. So what have we got? We've got Mendeley, couple people with Mendeley. Oh, and a couple of you were thinking about Boji's stuff. That's excellent. He's very good. He theoretically changes what we do. Okay, RefWorks, Mendeley, Zotero, and Adrian is such an advocate of Citavi that I will even mention it coming up in a slide. So I'm an EndNote person. And I'll tell you in a minute that I've seriously considered Citavi. I just haven't gotten there yet. So you're seeing on the screen my EndNote catalog. And I point this out because whatever you are using, there are certain things about it that I want you to really pay attention to. Whichever one you're using, hopefully you have gotten to comfortable with the way it downloads a reference from a PDF you found in your university online library to it. So there's every one of them has a certain kind of mechanism, and you have to make peace with that mechanism so you can get the references in quickly. That doesn't mean they come in perfectly, but they at least come in quickly. You also want to be able to back it up on the web, because I used to say if my house was on fire, the one thing I'd save is my EndNote library, because once you have this, it's the last thing you ever want to lose. So make sure that it backs up. And then I just want to point out that it's a never-ending list of groups. And so you use groups as ways to stash when you're going to be writing. You have your ideas together, and so maybe you're using, I'll just use this as an example, maybe you've decided to organize your lit into the conceptual framework. And so here are all the topical ones. So you put topical lit as a group, and then you go through your lit and you slide in the ones you want to use, and or your methodological lit gets slid in for that part, or the things that back up your problem, so that one piece of literature, one writer might affect many folders, but the folders are there so that you can quickly find the things you think segment there. Now, I have talked at other times about writing on using a spreadsheet to notice where things go. And some of you might have your references down one side of a spreadsheet and have the main idea that came from that, and then some sub ideas which will fold into these parts. So basically, no matter how we think about it, we have a crosswise. We have the references itself, all that information, what that author wrote. But that author wrote about several things, and other authors write about several things, and they come together in the topic areas. And when you do a lit review, you're writing you're writing the topic areas, not the authors. You're writing what you want, and I talked about that at length before. So this is a way to get them all what you want. And these are all the groups I've ever used. Every book I write, every chapter I write, I make a group, I slide things in, and it's an ongoing process. So you have to decide on a system that works for you. And if you are just beginning this, the most important thing is that you begin something and you stick with it long enough to really run into its challenges. And then you try to move past the challenges with it rather than find a new tool if you can. So what has worked for me over time is not to use the cite as you write stuff. And so some softwares you can put in maybe all of them, I don't know. You can put in your cursor and you can go to your library and you can highlight that and it'll put that citation in. And then it'll put it on the reference list and it'll alphabetize it for you and it'll put it in the right order. I found over time that was more trouble than it was worth, because but you have to choose. They're hard to change. When they come in that way, they're hard to make small changes. Those things you change tend to come back at you, is one thing. Another thing is that journals hate them. Most journals won't let you send them because they can't manipulate them when they publish in the same way. So with those pressures, I just took to, I go as I write, I put in my citations. If I know this full citation, fine. If I know I need to find a citation, fine. I have a reference list I'm putting together at the same time. And so if I have a neat citation or a real citation on any one page, I go to my reference library, back to the screen, and over here on the right-hand side, I have this one highlighted, and I copy and paste it into a reference sheet. So I can alphabetize. It's giving me the reference the way it should be for the guidelines I'm using. So now I'm in APA 7. It's an APA 7 perfect reference, or close to perfect reference. And so I'm happy with that. I can do the alphabetizing. I can make a note that I need a cite on page 3, and I can keep a list of where I need cites. And then it makes the work at the end easier. And the groups help with that. As I'm writing, I slide around. Now, Adrian mentioned Citavi. Adrian in previous times has shown us Citavi. It is not a highly used reference in the United States, but it's really good. I think it's really good. I looked into it, and I don't do this kind of writing often enough to want to go through that head-breaking work of moving my entire reference library to a new tool and learning that tool when I kind of know how the one I have functions. But I think if you're just looking for a new tool before you, settle, I would recommend Citavi as well. And Adrian, you might want to type in why you like it so much too for everybody. Okay, so hopefully that's helpful. If you haven't, and of course, if your universities are giving you one, that's great. If you can use it, even better. I don't think many of them care all that much if you wanted to go somewhere else. And if your library isn't all that extensive, Citavi would just absolutely absorb it if that's of use to you. I think the most important thing is that the tool is useful. We can put things in groups. It syncs well, and it doesn't drive us crazy. So I'm sure Adrienne is writing. Okay. As she comes back to us about writing, there's this wonderful thing called academic voice, and it takes a long time to figure out, and it takes repetition. So until you have an academic voice that you can stand on and be completely comfortable with, I recommend that you have in your models some writers that you like their academic voice. It would be close to what you would like for yourself. And use those models when you pull in a section. So I have found over time with working with people who were highly stressed to get a lot of writing done in a very short period of time, that it is most useful for them to use their models, look at them critically, and say, this guy did I kind of know where I want to go, and this one is closest to the background I'm looking for. And just copy and paste that whole background in, and then to rework your stuff right over the top of their stuff. It allows you to take a sentence structure that you like and use it. Sentence structure is key. So it's the way verbs are used. It's an active voice, and it's a very matter-of-fact way of writing. And because, especially when we're beginners, we have a lot of passion about our work, it's hard for us to write as matter-of-fact as somebody who's gone through the whole process and has published it. They will be much more, and you will be much more matter-of-fact at the end. It's part of kind of the process of being beaten on for so many years. So pull in, read, view. And just looking, Adrienne has answered that the metadata entered accurately when you first add it to Citavi. Citavi takes care of the citation and referencing 100% error-free. So you do have to make sure it's the same in all of them. A database is only as good, that's what you enter. So if you're, excuse me, if you're pulling in from somewhere else and it isn't perfect, it won't be perfect until you fix it in your database. Okay. Let's see if I can get rid of that tickle in the back of my throat. Now, other thing I want to say about writing is that your headings and your table of contents really count. So, thank you. You have main ideas and they're encapsulated in a heading. And then you have points you want to make under that main idea. And each one of those points becomes a paragraph. And then you write the paragraphs. So if you organize in a this manner with headings, points, and what the transition is, if you look and make it the funnel from that beginning, then you'll proceed faster. So if you have things you've brought in from somebody else and you've got your own map, let's call it, of headings and points you want to make, you have two things that what your brain can work with and merge to help your writing proceed at an objective distance. The problem with writing when you don't have anything but a blank piece of paper is that everything that's going on in your head gets tied up and it ends up being all tied up in your words. So I'm trying to give you a couple of things that can keep you objective. And remember that there is only 1 point per paragraph. The surest thing to kill your review is that you slipped into a 1.5 or 2 points. So 1 point per paragraph, and then you lockstep your people through what you want to say. Now, what is revision? Remember that your writing is 1/4 to 1/3 of your work. So some of you go into this like you're going to do it all. You're not. You're going to get it down on paper, and you're going to use some frameworks to do the best you can. And then 2/3 to 3/4 of your work is how good you are at revising. So the first thing you want to revise is, do my headings go in a logical order? Is my funnel right? Because it's easy to move stuff around when you've got the blocks in place. Do my paragraphs make one and only 1 point? That's a really strong thing. And then the other thing that will help you with revision is the read aloud function. So just in case some of you are not as adept at Microsoft Word as you might want to be, I'm going to go back to my screenshot. This is a book I'm working on. And up here at the top, can you see my cursor? I don't know if you can see my cursor. At the top, you can't. Okay, so right up where the save is, there's a bunch of little boxes that I find really helpful. And one of those boxes looks like a capital A with lines across it, and it's the read aloud function. And it's like this.
Navigating the hidden curriculum of graduate school. Thriving inside and outside of academic life.
Okay, so it reads to you, and it's very helpful to have it to listen rather than read. It uses a different part of your brain. You hear things you could never see that your eyes would just skip over. Very helpful. So how do you find it? You go up here to the top. There's a little pull down menu, and it shows that's talking about all the commands on that bar, and you click on more commands. And it brings up a list like this. And in that list, you're not going to go for the popular commands because academics need more commands than that. So you go to all the commands, and then you can scroll down and find read aloud in the R's. You can also go and look at other things. And there's some on the pd.education sites, there's a bunch of snippets on how to set up Microsoft Word. I think you should have your theme set up. I think you should have your font set up. I think your headings you should have APA in as a theme, and or whatever your school uses as guide. I think you should have comments so you can get to them quickly. You can write notes to yourself. All of those things I use all the time. And if you are looking at your document and it does not have this on the left-hand side, you do not have your navigation pane. So if you go to View, see, click off navigation pane, click on navigation pane. And then you have to have your headings. See how across the top they're different? Those headings are set up so that I can click on one and you'll see what heading it is. And that allows me to jump through this document. And there's a million times when you're writing a book, when you're writing a dissertation, you need to be able to jump around in it easily. This also builds a perfect table of contents at the end. So if you don't have Microsoft Word working for you, you need to do that. And if you don't have Microsoft Word 365, it's the best $100 you'll ever spend because it's a very strong tool. And everybody will be able to read your things. Okay. Oh, one more thing. I forgot. I knew there was one more thing. If you don't have Microsoft Word to help you out with your editing, you should. So go to Options, go to Proofing, make sure everything is clicked on, and then at the bottom, except readability stats, your readability will always be off the charts. And then go to Grammar and Refinements, Settings, and click everything on. It'll find your weak verbs, it'll find your cliches, it'll find all kinds of things. It's a little bit more awkward than Grammarly, but it doesn't cost. And you would have to pay for Grammarly to get all of this kind of help. And Grammarly also messes up Word a little bit. They're not as completely compatible, I think, as they need to be. Okay, so those are very useful, I hope, tools for writing. I'm going to ask all of you to consider sending me writing samples for next week. And the way I need it done is a screen capture of your navigation pane, or you make a table of contents and you put a section in, and then below that you give me a heading and some writing. Just that much. Because I want to start helping you think about things. And it's much, much better to use work that's actually going on than work that is already as picture perfect as it might be for that author because they've graduated, which is what I usually do. Adrian has given you a link for Citavi. For those watching by recording, it's Citavi, citavi.com/en. But if you're happy with what you're doing and it works for you, don't mess with the software, just keep writing. Okay, so what's happening today as far as resources? I went to the pd.education site and I logged in, doesn't matter which site you log into, and I did a search at the top for what goes where. And if you're not as familiar with that as you want to be, it's here. It's this big red bar. Search here. And I typed in, the first thing I typed in was what goes where. because you're now about at the stage where you're going to start wondering if you put this idea in this place or this place. And there's some very good resources on that. I've given them to you, some bibliographic resources as well, and a whole lot that Professor Maria did about writing, especially about paragraphs, consistencies across the work you're doing right now. And so there is a webinar, and there are handouts, and there are exercises, and they are all linked in the handouts that you have right here. And so homework this week is for you to make your own homework. And I'm suggesting, I would like you to prepare a writing sample for next week and to send it to me. And again, I'll type in, it is Alana at pd.education. And it'll work for you because you'll get feedback if it's one of the ones I use. And that's useful. Now, Lisa has asked me to type in the name of this book. So let me just do that. Reason and Rigor, and by Ravitch, 1V, ITCH, and Riggin. And my version is the first edition. Doesn't matter. Page 10 is where they first outlined what a conceptual framework was. Now, I also want you to set your own goals for this week. And let me talk a little bit about goals. They need to be measurable. You're not going to get as fast or as far as you want to if you say, oh, I want to work on my this week. And I'm as bad at that as you are. I will say, oh, I want to work on the index for my book this week. But it wasn't until I said, oh, I'm having trouble. I need to map out the index for my book. Oh, now I need to watch some videos to see what I'm doing wrong because I don't seem to get this right. Oh, now I have the video knowledge. I need to actually begin to do the work. That got me over the hump on something that it held me up for a month, which is crazy. So if you're not progressing, it's probably because your goals are big and clumsy rather than specific and little. So every task I have to figure out what I'm doing. That means I need to go to the web and I need to watch some videos. I need to get the ideas I need, or I need to spend some time with my book, physically writing what I need to do. And then to prepare myself to do it, and then to do it. So set your goals this week. And please take this survey. So we have 9 minutes left. I'm happy to answer questions. And actually, Adrian, if it's okay with you, can I ask for another help? I'm going to make you presenter, if you would not mind turning on your mic a little. Adrian is taking both, just amazingly complimentary that she's taking both, because she's just turned in her, or has been working on her results, and I used it as an example for yesterday's class. Adrian, when you get your mic on, my question that I think other people might be interested, she's developed some very sophisticated writing. But when you first wrote, you were full of jargon. It was very difficult to read. You were having trouble getting your ideas in a straight line that other people could easily pick them off the page. And that is no longer the case. So would you talk for just a minute about your process that got you from that early place to now? And if others of you want to have questions answered, go ahead. I'll take them as well, but maybe she'll be willing to turn on her microphone. And if she's still around. and if she can. I jumped on her. I didn't tell her I was going to do this, so it might not be possible. And so if others of you have questions, we'll take them as well. It's, I guess, a difficult thing to get from, oh, and one thing, I think Adrian used this. Oh, you're setting up your mic. Good, thanks, Adrian. Is talking into a microphone rather than writing with your fingers. That might be helpful. So she's setting up her mic, and we'll wait. I use, when I'm writing, I don't use it all the time for everything, but when I'm writing, I use Dragon, and I use it on my phone because it's very accurate on the phone. And then I even go for walks and I talk my ideas, and then I have the rough draft. I put it through Evernote, and I copy and paste it into Word, and I get all my pieces together, and then that gives me a first rough draft without having to type them, and then I can analyze it according to the funnel and stuff. So that's a process you might consider. We look up. Here you go. Adrian, what's your process like, and how did you get better?
Well, I did a number of things. So the first thing is, so I have heard from people that if the first thing is like, if your sentence goes beyond like 4 lines or more, then it's going to be very hard to process, and that's the first rule that I remember and stick to. And then the second thing is, I then use the new plan structure to structure my sentences into paragraph. That actually helps you organize your thoughts more in a more logical manner and in a systematic manner.
And
so
what she's referring to is if you go to the PD to Education site and you type in meal, MEAL, I think it'll come up. I'm checking it right now, but it's Professor Maria's way of working with writing.
And then in terms of the use of jargon and all that, it takes some time to really get rid of some of the unnecessary use of those like terminology terms and things like that. But then I think if you practice more, you write more, and then when you finish like 1 or 2 paragraphs, you sometimes take some time aside to really read it through again, using not from your own perspective, but from a perspective of someone else who's not that familiar with the topic area. Then you would see that sometimes it's hard to really understand things with all those technical terms there. So the third thing that I did is, there's no shortcut. You have to write more, but then at the same time you don't just write, but sometimes you take the time to pause and look back at what you have written and see whether you think other people with less of a background can really understand what you're saying.
Well, and was there anything you did that was you wrote by talking too, didn't you?
Yes, sometimes I do that. Yes.
And was there anything that caused the biggest breakthrough?
I would say, if you mean by writing by talking.
Yeah, or no, just by anything you did that you suddenly realized 6 months later you were doing it much better than you had been.
I think I use a lot of mind maps. And I'm a big fan of using tables. Like everything, if things are not clear, I think writing is actually is an extension of your thinking. So if your thinking is not clear, your writing is not going to be good for sure. So I think it's important to get your ideas organized, not in your head probably, because in your head everything could be just perfect. But then if you have that organized, and then if you can explain it clearly in a table or in a flow chart or anything like that, then chances are you're going to be able to write it out more clearly.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for jumping in. I think it's really useful to people to have that, especially when we know that you've faced some stuff and you've come out the other side. So thank you. And I'm sorry I put you on the spot, but you did great.
Thank you.
So with that, Erica asked, would it be a good idea to write the methodology and literature review in the same order that I introduced topics in my introduction? It is a good idea to set up a pattern and to help your reader. Your reader likes patterns. Your reader likes to know. It's one of the reasons that results chapters frequently follow the order of the research questions. How you put your research questions together determines how you write them in your literature. That is definitely something that can go. And I think everybody wants to thank Adrian. That was excellent. We are done with time today. And I'm heading off for office hours. I hope to see all of you again. Next week, please send writing samples. Let's really get into writing. Maybe I'll look over, I'll see what comes in, and then I'll put something together that seems like it's the most helpful something. So good luck to you all, and I'll see you next week. When I always forget to turn off the recording. Here we go.